The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac as Captain Nora Steele completed her final training approach, unaware that in 30 minutes, her skills would be tested in ways the Academy never prepared her for. The emergency klaxon pierced the dawn silence, sending ground crews scrambling. American diplomats were trapped in a mountain fortress, and 12 hours of failed rescue attempts had left commanders desperate. As Nora taxied toward the briefing hangar, she had no idea that today, everything she'd trained for would come down to one impossible shot. Now, let me take you back to where this story truly begins. Captain Nora Steele pulled back on the stick, feeling the F-35's nose lift as she completed her third practice approach of the morning. The desert training range stretched endlessly below, marked by targets she'd hit with textbook precision. Her radio crackled. "Lightning 7-2, that's a perfect run. Return to base." "Copy that, Tower." 7-2 inbound. Nora banked left, the base coming into view through her canopy. Another routine training day almost over. She'd grab lunch, file her reports, maybe catch up on some reading. The kind of peaceful Tuesday that made military life feel almost normal. The emergency klaxon shattered that peace. The piercing wail echoed across the base as Nora touched down. Ground crews dropped their tools and ran toward the alert hangar. Emergency vehicles raced past her taxiway. She'd heard that sound during drills, but this was different. This was real. All available pilots report to Briefing Room Alpha immediately. The base commander's voice cut through the radio static, sharp and urgent. This is not a drill. Nora's pulse quickened. She parked her aircraft and grabbed her gear, jogging toward the main building. Other pilots converged from different directions, all wearing the same expression of controlled tension. Inside the briefing room, she found chaos barely contained behind military discipline. Intelligence officers huddled over computer screens. Radio operators spoke in rapid, clipped tones. Maps of mountainous terrain covered the main display screen. "Listen up." Colonel Martinez stepped to the front of the room. His weathered face was grim. At 0600 this morning, armed militants stormed the American consulate in the Corvani Mountains. They've taken 4 diplomatic personnel hostage. The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics and distant radio chatter. Ground assault teams have been engaged for 8 hours. The enemy holds the high ground in a reinforced compound. Natural defensive position, heavy weapons, sophisticated anti-aircraft systems. Martinez paused, scanning the room. 3 rescue attempts have failed. We've lost 2 helicopters and have multiple casualties. Nora studied the terrain map. Steep ridges surrounded the target area. Narrow valleys channeled any approach. It looked like a fortress designed by nature itself. "The hostages are running out of time," Martinez continued. "Intelligence suggests the militants plan to move them at nightfall. Once that happens, we may never find them again." Major Thompson, the squadron's senior pilot, raised his hand. "What's the mission profile, sir?" "Close air support for a final ground assault." "But this isn't typical CAS." Martinez clicked to the next slide, showing the compound in detail. The hostages are being held in the central building. Enemy positions surround them in a tight perimeter. We need surgical strikes. Precision within meters, not miles. Nora felt her stomach tighten. She'd trained for this kind of mission, but training targets didn't hold American lives in the balance. "Who's taking the lead?" asked Captain Reynolds, a veteran with over 200 combat missions. Martinez hesitated for just a moment. "Captain Steele, you're up." The room turned to look at her. Some faces showed surprise. Others displayed something that might have been doubt. "Sir?" Reynolds leaned forward. "No disrespect to Captain Steele, but this mission requires surgical precision under heavy fire. Maybe someone with more combat experience should." "Captain Steele has the highest precision scores in the squadron," Martinez cut him off. "Her marksmanship ratings are exceptional." "Marksmanship on a training range is different from combat," muttered Lieutenant Colonel Hayes from the back of the room. This requires nerves of steel when people are shooting back. Nora stood up. I can handle it, sir. Hayes shook his head slowly. This isn't about handling it, Captain. It's about perfection under pressure. One mistake and those hostages die. Are we really sure? The decision is made, Martinez said firmly. Captain Steele, you'll have 2 wingmen for support. Wheels up in 30 minutes. As the briefing broke up, Nora gathered her flight plans and targeting data. Around her, she heard whispered conversations. Seems like a hell of a risk. She's good, but this is different. Hope she doesn't freeze up when it counts. Nora walked toward the door, her flight helmet tucked under her arm. The weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders, but beneath that pressure, something else stirred. Determination. Those hostages needed her to be perfect today. She had 30 minutes to prepare for the most important mission of her life. Nora ran through her pre-flight checklist with mechanical precision, but her mind raced ahead to the target area. Each switch, each system check, each fuel reading, everything had to be perfect. The ground crew worked around her F-35 with unusual urgency, their faces tight with concentration. Fuel load complete, Captain, called Sergeant Williams, pulling the hose away from her aircraft. She's topped off and ready. Thanks, Sergeant. Nora climbed the ladder to her cockpit. Any word from the ground teams? Williams shook his head. Nothing good. Radio chatter says they're still pinned down. Nora settled into her seat and began the startup sequence. The familiar hum of electronics powering up normally calmed her nerves, but today it felt different. Each system came online knowing it might be tested beyond its limits. Lightning 7-2, you're cleared for takeoff, came the tower's voice. Good hunting, Captain. 7-2 rolling. The F-35's engine roared to life behind her. Nora felt the familiar push as she accelerated down the runway, but this time the weight of the mission pressed against her chest along with the G-forces. The aircraft lifted off smoothly, climbing into the crisp morning air. Her wingmen, Captains Morrison and Park, formed up on either side. Morrison's voice crackled through her headset. 7-2, this is 7-3. Beautiful day for flying. Copy that, 7-3. Let's hope it stays that way. The flight to the target area took 45 minutes across increasingly rugged terrain. Below, the flat desert gave way to rolling hills, then steep ridges that cut the landscape like knife wounds. Nora studied the terrain through her aircraft's advanced targeting system, memorizing landmarks and potential approach routes. 7-2, this is Reaper Base. The ground commander's voice cut through the radio static, strained and exhausted. We've been at this for 9 hours now. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. Reaper Base, 7-2. What's the current status? Enemy has us pinned in 3 different positions. Every time we try to advance, they hit us from multiple angles. They've got perfect fields of fire from that compound. Nora could hear the frustration in his voice. Hours of failed attacks, wounded soldiers, and a ticking clock, it would break down any commander's patience. We're 5 minutes out, she radioed back. Can you mark your forward positions? Already done. Look for green smoke. Whatever you do, don't get closer than 200 meters to our lines. Enemy's got anti-aircraft systems we didn't know about. Morrison's voice joined the conversation. What kind of systems? Shoulder-fired missiles, at least. Maybe something bigger. We lost 2 helicopters trying to get close. Nora felt her stomach drop slightly. Helicopters were sitting ducks compared to jets, but any missile that could bring down an aircraft meant danger for all of them. The mountain range loomed ahead, jagged peaks reaching toward the sky like broken teeth. Nora banked left, following the navigation route that would bring them around the back side of the ridge. According to intelligence, this approach would keep them hidden until the last possible moment. There, Park's voice came through the radio. 2 o'clock, about 15 miles. That's got to be it. Nora looked where he indicated and saw it, a cluster of buildings perched on a rocky outcrop like a medieval castle. Smoke drifted up from several points around the compound. The green smoke from friendly forces was barely visible in the distance. Morrison muttered, "No wonder they can't get close. That place is built like a fortress." Nora activated her targeting system and began scanning the compound. The high-resolution cameras revealed details that made her heart sink. Concrete walls, steel reinforcements, defensive positions carved into the rock itself. Whoever had built this place had known exactly what they were doing. 7-2, Reaper Base. Can you see the target? Affirmative. Beginning reconnaissance now. Nora circled the compound at a safe distance, her cameras recording everything. Enemy soldiers moved between buildings with disciplined precision. This wasn't some ragtag militia, these were trained fighters who understood modern warfare. 7-2, this is 7-3. Check your 3 o'clock low. I've got movement in those rocks. Nora looked and saw them, more enemy positions hidden in the natural rock formations around the compound. Gun emplacements that hadn't shown up in the satellite photos. Surface-to-air missile sites positioned to cover multiple approach angles. Reaper Base, you weren't kidding about the air defenses. I count at least 6 missile positions, maybe more. Copy that, 7-2. We've been dodging their fire all morning. They've got overlapping coverage of every approach route we can find. Nora continued her reconnaissance, but each pass revealed more problems. The target was smaller than she'd hoped. The main building where the hostages were held was surrounded by enemy positions within meters. Any bombing run would have to thread the needle between friendly forces below and hostile air defenses above, all while placing ordnance precisely enough to avoid civilian casualties. 7-2, Reaper Base. We're running low on ammunition down here. Whatever you're going to do, it needs to happen soon. Morrison's voice joined the conversation. Command, this doesn't look good. Maybe we should call for backup, get some more aircraft up here. Negative, came the reply. This is all we've got. Weather's moving in from the west. If we don't act in the next 2 hours, we'll be socked in until tomorrow. Nora looked toward the western horizon and saw the dark clouds building. A storm was coming, and with it the end of any chance to save the hostages. 7-2, what's your assessment? The ground commander asked. Nora took a deep breath, studying the tactical display one more time. The compound sat like a spider in the center of its web, every approach covered by defensive fire. The margin for error was smaller than anything she'd ever attempted. It's going to be tight, she said finally. Really tight. But I think we can do it. Now came the hard part, turning reconnaissance into action. Lightning 7-2, you're cleared for your first attack run. The ground commander's voice carried 10 hours of exhaustion and desperation. We've marked the priority targets with laser designation. Nora banked her F-35 into a steep descent, lining up her approach vector. Through her targeting display, she could see the red dots marking enemy positions, machine gun nests built into the rocky outcroppings, mortar teams hidden behind concrete barriers, and the ever-present threat of those surface-to-air missile sites. Copy, Reaper Base. Beginning attack run now. The compound rushed up to meet her as she dove toward the target. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, selecting guided munitions and fine-tuning her targeting parameters. Everything looked perfect on the displays, wind speed, altitude, trajectory calculations all within acceptable ranges. Then the sky exploded around her. Missile launch. Missile launch. Park's voice cracked through the radio as warning alarms screamed in Nora's cockpit. She saw the white trail of smoke streaking up from the compound, then another, then a third. Someone down there had been waiting for exactly this moment. Her aircraft's defensive systems activated automatically, deploying chaff and flares while she yanked the stick hard right. 7-2, brake left. Another one coming up. Nora rolled inverted and pulled through a diving turn that pressed her deep into her seat. The missile shot past her canopy close enough that she could see its fins. Too close. Way too close. Morrison's voice came through her headset. "Nora, you okay?" "I'm good. Still here." But her heart hammered against her ribs as she climbed back to a safe altitude. "Reaper Base, you didn't mention they had that many missile sites. We're still taking fire down here. Hard to get an accurate count when people are shooting at you." Nora circled back around, studying her targeting display. The enemy positions seemed to shift and multiply each time she looked. What appeared to be one gun emplacement turned out to be three. A simple mortar position revealed itself as a complex network of interconnected bunkers. 7-2, this is 7-3. Morrison's voice carried a note she didn't like. "Maybe I should take the next run. I've got more experience with heavy SAM environments. I can handle it." "I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying this is turning out to be more complicated than the briefing suggested." Park joined the conversation. "These guys know what they're doing down there. They've been planning this for a while." Nora lined up for her second approach, this time coming in from a different angle. The defensive fire started earlier this time. They were learning her patterns, adapting to her tactics. Streams of tracer rounds reached up toward her like deadly fireworks. Her targeting computer locked onto the primary objective, a reinforced gun position that had been pouring fire onto the trapped ground forces. The building housing the hostages sat just 200 meters beyond it. She had to thread her ordnance between the enemy position and the friendlies, with precision measured in single-digit meters. Locked on target. Engaging now. She squeezed the trigger, releasing a guided bomb that should have eliminated the gun position cleanly. But as the weapon flew toward its target, electronic interference filled her cockpit displays. Static washed across her screens, navigation systems flickered, targeting data scrambled. What the hell? She fought to regain control of her systems as another missile streaked past her aircraft. "They're jamming us." The bomb, deprived of its guidance signal, impacted 50 meters off target. Close enough to scare the enemy, but not close enough to eliminate the threat. Below, the gun position continued firing at the pinned ground forces. 7-2, that was a miss, the ground commander reported, his voice flat with disappointment. "Target is still active." Morrison's aircraft swooped past her. "Nora, let me take over the precision strikes." "No shame in it, this is what we train for." Those words hit her like a physical blow. The tone, the assumption, the careful way he phrased it, she'd heard it all before. The helpful offer that wasn't really an offer at all. "I can do this job, Morrison." "I know you can. But maybe what? Maybe I should step aside and let the men handle the hard parts?" Static filled the radio for a moment before Morrison replied. "That's not what I meant." But they both knew it was exactly what he meant. Park's voice cut through the tension. "Both of you knock it off. We've got friendlies taking fire down there." Nora pulled up from her attack run and reassessed the situation. The jamming equipment had to be somewhere in the compound, probably a mobile unit they could move between buildings. As long as it stayed active, precision targeting would be nearly impossible. "Reaper Base, I need to take out their jamming capability before I can make accurate strikes." Negative, 7-2. We don't have time for a systematic approach. The hostages are in immediate danger. Intel reports enemy movement around the main building. Through her targeting system, Nora could see what he meant. Armed figures moved with purpose near the building where the Americans were being held. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't good. 7-2, this is Reaper Base. A new voice came through the radio, someone higher up the command chain. "We're 11 hours into this operation. We need results now, not later. If you can't deliver precision strikes under these conditions, we need to consider other options." Other options? Like calling in Morrison or Park. Like admitting she couldn't handle the pressure when it mattered most. Nora looked down at the compound again, studying the pattern of defensive fire, the placement of the jamming equipment, the location of the hostages. Everything she'd trained for, everything she'd worked toward, came down to this moment. "Give me one more run," she said into her radio. I think I know how to beat their jamming. 7-2, Morrison started. One more run, she repeated, banking into position. I've got this. Below, the enemy forces prepared for her next attack, their missile sights tracking her movement across the sky. The jamming equipment hummed with electronic interference, ready to scramble her guidance systems again. The hostages waited in their concrete prison, unaware that their lives hung on the precision of a pilot some of her own colleagues weren't sure could deliver when it counted. Nora took a deep breath and began her approach. This time, she had a plan. The next few minutes would prove whether she belonged in this cockpit, or whether the doubters had been right all along. Nora dove toward the compound again, but this time she ignored the primary targets completely. Instead, she focused on a small building near the eastern wall, the source of the electronic interference that had ruined her previous strike. 7-2, what are you doing? Morrison's voice crackled through her headset. That's not a designated target. Taking out their jamming equipment first. The defensive fire started immediately, streams of tracer rounds reaching up toward her aircraft like angry hornets. But Nora had studied their pattern during her previous runs. She knew where the gaps were, the brief moments when their overlapping coverage had blind spots. She rolled left, then right, threading between missile sites while her targeting computer locked onto the jamming facility. This time, she flew too low and too fast for the electronic interference to disrupt her weapons systems effectively. Engaging jamming site. The guided bomb dropped away from her aircraft and streaked toward the target. Nora pulled up hard, feeling the G-forces press her into her seat as anti-aircraft fire filled the space where she'd been seconds before. The explosion lit up her rear-view display. The jamming building disappeared in a cloud of concrete dust and twisted metal. Direct hit, Park reported. Nice flying, 7-2. For the first time in 20 minutes, Nora's electronic systems showed clear, uninterrupted signals. Her targeting display stabilized, navigation systems came back online, and the constant static in her communications cleared. But her moment of satisfaction vanished when Reaper Base came back on the radio. All aircraft, this is Reaper Base. We have a problem. The ground commander's voice carried a new edge of panic. Enemy forces are moving the hostages. I repeat, they are moving the hostages to a secondary location. Through her targeting system, Nora could see armed figures escorting 4 people across the compound courtyard. Even from her altitude, she could tell the 4 figures moved with the hesitant, fearful gait of captives. Where are they taking them? Morrison asked. Unknown. There's a tunnel system on the north side of the compound. If they get them underground, we may never find them again. Nora's heart sank. A tunnel system meant the enemy had planned for exactly this scenario, a way to move the hostages beyond the reach of airstrikes, beyond the reach of rescue. How much time do we have? She asked. Based on their current movement, maybe 10 minutes before they reach the tunnel entrance. 10 minutes. Nora looked at her targeting display, studying the enemy positions that still protected the compound. Even with her jamming equipment destroyed, she still faced multiple missile sites, machine gun nests, and mortar positions, all strategically placed to cover any approach route to the main courtyard. 7-2, this is command. A new voice joined the conversation, someone from back at base. Intel update. We're showing increased enemy activity throughout the region. This may be part of a larger operation. What does that mean for us? It means this is our only shot. Once those hostages disappear into the tunnel system, they're gone. We won't get another chance. Nora began calculating approach vectors, studying the compound layout with fresh urgency. The courtyard where the hostages were being moved sat in the exact center of the defensive perimeter. Every enemy position had clear lines of fire to that area. Reaper Base, I need you to keep those hostages in the open as long as possible. We're pinned down, 7-2. We can barely move, let alone launch an assault. That's when the real problem revealed itself. Even if she could eliminate the enemy positions around the courtyard, the ground forces couldn't move fast enough to prevent the hostages from reaching the tunnels. She needed to strike with surgical precision while the captives were still visible, still reachable. 7-2, this is 7-3. Morrison's voice carried a tone she recognized, the careful diplomacy of someone about to deliver bad news. Maybe we should consider a different approach. Call in heavy bombers, level the whole area. That would kill the hostages. I know. But if we can't reach them anyway. No. Nora's response came out sharper than she intended. We don't write off American lives because the mission got difficult. Park joined the conversation. Nora's right. But this is going to require perfect timing and perfect accuracy. One mistake. I know what's at stake. Through her cockpit, Nora could see the hostages being moved closer to the tunnel entrance. Their captors moved with military precision, using defensive positions for cover while maintaining a schedule that suggested careful planning. Her targeting computer chimed, indicating optimal firing positions for the remaining enemy threats. But the solutions it offered would take time, multiple attack runs, systematic elimination of defensive positions, a methodical approach that might work if they had an hour instead of minutes. Reaper Base, can you give me a distraction? Something to draw their fire away from the courtyard? We're pretty much out of ammunition down here. Been shooting at these guys for 11 hours. Nora felt sweat running down her back despite the cockpit's climate control. Every option she considered ran into the same problem: too many targets, too little time, too narrow a margin for error. 7-2, what's your plan? The ground commander asked. That was the question, wasn't it? What was her plan? Morrison and Park waited for her answer. Command waited for her answer. The hostages, unaware that their lives depended on her next decision, continued their march toward the tunnels. I'm going to take out the defensive positions in sequence, then strike the courtyard area before they reach the tunnel entrance. That's a lot of precision flying in a very short time frame, Morrison said carefully. Under heavy fire, with multiple SAM sites still active. I can do it. But even as she said the words, doubt crept into her mind. The targeting solutions required split-second timing, perfect accuracy, and the kind of flying that left no room for hesitation or second-guessing. 7-2, are you sure about this? Park's voice carried genuine concern. Because if you're not completely confident. I'm sure. Through her targeting display, she watched the hostages move closer to the tunnel entrance. In 8 minutes, maybe less, they would disappear into the mountain and this entire operation would become a failure. 4 American lives lost because she couldn't deliver precision strikes under pressure. Nora rolled into her attack position, selecting her first target, a missile site that commanded the approach to the courtyard. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, but she could feel the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her. Beginning attack run now. The compound rushed up to meet her once again, but this time felt different. This time, everything depended on the next 5 minutes. This time, there would be no second chances. Below, the enemy forces prepared to defend their positions one final time, unaware that the pilot diving toward them was about to attempt something that would either save 4 American lives or prove that the doubters had been right about her all along. The real test was about to begin. Nora's first missile site vanished in a ball of fire and concrete dust. Her guided bomb had found its mark perfectly, silencing the SAM launcher that guarded the northern approach to the courtyard. But even as debris rained down on the compound, she could see more missile trails streaking up toward her aircraft. Missile launch. Multiple missiles. Park's voice cut through her headset as her cockpit erupted in warning alarms. She rolled hard left, deploying chaff and flares while pulling through a turn that made her vision gray at the edges. The first missile shot past her wing, close enough that she felt the aircraft shudder from the shock wave. The second one followed her turn, its seeker head locked onto her engine signature. Come on, she muttered, diving toward the canyon floor while her defensive systems worked frantically to break the missile's lock. The weapon detonated 50 meters behind her aircraft, close enough to rattle her teeth but far enough away to avoid serious damage. Nora pulled out of her dive and climbed back toward engagement altitude, but precious seconds had been lost, seconds the hostages didn't have. 7-2, status report, Morrison called. I'm good. One SAM site down, 4 to go. Through her targeting display, she could see the hostages had moved closer to the tunnel entrance. Maybe 6 minutes left, possibly less. The armed figures escorting them moved with disciplined urgency now, aware that airstrikes were systematically eliminating their defensive positions. Nora lined up on her second target, a machine gun nest built into the rocky outcropping that overlooked the courtyard. But as she began her attack run, she noticed something that made her stomach drop. The remaining missile sites were coordinating their fire, launching in sequence to keep her constantly evading instead of attacking. They're learning our pattern, she reported. Adjusting tactics to keep me defensive. Copy that, 7-2. Can you adapt? That was the question, wasn't it? Could she adapt fast enough, accurately enough, to stay ahead of an enemy that was clearly more sophisticated than anyone had expected? The machine gun nest erupted in sparks and smoke as her second bomb found its target. But immediately afterward, 3 more missile trails rose from different positions around the compound. They'd been waiting for her to commit to an attack before launching. This time the evasion was uglier. Nora had to dive into the canyon system itself, using the mountain ridges as cover while missiles exploded against rock faces around her. The terrain that provided protection also limited her maneuvering options, a deadly trade-off that left her aircraft's engines straining at maximum power. Nora! Morrison's voice cracked with tension. You're flying right into the mountains. She pulled out of the canyon with barely 50 feet to spare, her aircraft's altitude warning system screaming protests. But she was still airborne, still in the fight, and another enemy position had been eliminated. 3 SAM sites left. For minutes until the hostages reached the tunnels. Reaper Base, this is 7-2. I need an update on hostage position. They're at the halfway point to the tunnel entrance. Moving fast now, they know what you're doing up there. Nora selected her third target, but as she rolled into the attack position, her targeting computer displayed a problem that made her blood run cold. The remaining missile sites had repositioned themselves to create overlapping coverage of every possible approach route. There was no safe angle, no blind spot she could exploit. 7-2, this is command. The voice from base carried a tone she didn't want to hear. Weather update. That storm system is moving faster than predicted. You've got maybe 15 minutes before visibility drops to 0. 15 minutes. But the hostages would be underground in 4. Morrison, Park, I need you to draw their fire while I make my run. Copy that, 7-2. We're with you. Her wingmen dove toward the compound from opposite directions, not to attack but to force the enemy missile sites to reveal their positions and split their attention. It was a dangerous tactic that put them both at risk, but it was the only way to give her a clean shot at the remaining targets. Morrison's aircraft streaked across the compound, missiles chasing him as he pulled through a climbing turn that took him directly over the most heavily defended area. Park followed seconds later, drawing fire from the eastern positions while Nora lined up her approach from the south. Now, Nora! While they're tracking us. She dove toward her third target, but halfway through the attack run, her targeting system flickered and went dark. Not jamming this time, battle damage from her earlier missile encounters. The blast that had seemed like a near miss had apparently done more harm than she'd realized. System failure, she reported, fighting to keep her voice steady. I'm flying manual targeting now. Manual? Park's voice carried disbelief. At this altitude? At this speed? Manual targeting meant no computer assistance, no guidance corrections, no safety margins. Just her eyes, her instincts, and whatever skill she developed over years of training. The kind of flying that separated good pilots from exceptional ones. And the kind that got people killed when they made mistakes. She could see the third missile site clearly now, a SAM launcher positioned behind concrete barriers, its crew tracking her approach. Her finger hovered over the trigger, calculating wind drift and targeting corrections in her head while anti-aircraft fire filled the air around her. The bomb dropped away from her aircraft just as another missile streaked up from the launcher she was targeting. For a moment, weapon and countermeasure raced toward each other in a deadly game of timing. Her bomb hit first. The missile site disappeared in a cloud of fire and debris, but its final weapon continued climbing toward her aircraft, now unguided but still dangerous. Nora rolled inverted and pulled through a diving turn that took her below the canyon rim, using the mountain itself as a shield. The missile exploded somewhere above her, raining shrapnel on the rocks but missing her aircraft. Direct hit, Morrison reported. That's 3 down. But when Nora looked at her tactical display, she saw the worst possible scenario developing. The remaining 2 missile sites had moved to new positions that commanded perfect coverage of the courtyard area. And the hostages were just 2 minutes from the tunnel entrance. Reaper Base, I need those ground forces to move now. Create any kind of distraction. We're out of ammunition, 7-2. We can move, but we can't shoot. 2 missile sites. 2 minutes. In a targeting system that was completely dead. Nora took a deep breath and looked down at the compound one more time. The hostages moved in single file toward the tunnel entrance, their captors maintaining tight security even as their defensive perimeter collapsed around them. In 90 seconds, maybe less, they would disappear into the mountain and this entire mission would become a failure. She had one chance left. One attack run against 2 coordinated missile sites, with no targeting computer, no margin for error, and no time for a second attempt. All aircraft, this is 7-2. I'm going in. Nora, wait, Morrison started. But she was already diving toward the compound, her aircraft accelerating toward the most dangerous 60 seconds of her entire career. Everything she'd trained for, everything she'd worked toward, came down to the next minute of flying. Below, the enemy forces prepared for her final approach, their last 2 missile sites tracking her descent. The hostages took their final steps toward freedom or captivity. And Nora Steele prepared to discover whether she really had what it took to save them. Nora's F-35 screamed toward the compound in a near-vertical dive, enemy tracers reaching up like deadly fingers. Her broken targeting computer left her flying by instinct alone, calculating bomb release points in her head while 2 missile sites tracked her approach. 7-2, break off. You're flying into a kill zone. Morrison's voice cracked with urgency. She ignored him. Through her canopy, she could see the hostages, 4 tiny figures just 50 meters from the tunnel entrance. 30 seconds until they disappeared forever. The first missile launched when she was still 2 miles out. The white trail of smoke climbed toward her aircraft while she held her dive angle steady, refusing to break off her attack run. Her defensive systems screamed warnings, but she needed every second to line up her shots. Come on, she whispered, watching the missile climb toward her while she dove toward its launcher. Just a little closer. At the last possible moment, she released her first bomb and yanked the stick hard right. The missile shot past her cockpit so close she could see its fins spinning. Behind her, the first SAM site vanished in a ball of orange fire. But the second missile site was already launching. And the hostages were 20 meters from the tunnel. Nora rolled inverted and pulled through a turn that made her vision tunnel, fighting to line up on the final target while another missile climbed toward her. No time for careful calculations now, just raw pilot instinct and whatever precision she could manage while pulling 6GS. Target lock, she called out, though her broken computer showed nothing but static. The lock was in her head, in her hands on the controls, in years of training that had become pure muscle memory. She squeezed the trigger. The bomb dropped away just as the second missile reached her altitude. Nora rolled hard left, but there was nowhere to hide. The weapon's proximity fuse detonated 20 meters from her aircraft, filling her cockpit with the sound of metal fragments striking her fuselage. Warning lights flashed across her instrument panel. Engine temperature spiked. Hydraulic pressure dropped. But she was still flying, and below her the final missile site erupted in smoke and flames. Direct hit. Park shouted. Both sites are down. Through the smoke and dust, Nora could see the hostages had stopped moving. Their captors looked around frantically as their protective umbrella of missiles and machine guns disappeared around them. For the first time in 12 hours, they were exposed. Reaper Base, the courtyard is clear. Move now. Roger, 7-2. All units, advance. From her damaged aircraft, Nora watched ground forces pour out of their defensive positions and race toward the compound. Without the enemy's overlapping fire, they moved with the speed and precision of soldiers who had been waiting all day for this moment. The hostage rescue unfolded like a perfectly choreographed operation. Ground troops breached the compound walls while enemy forces, cut off from their command structure and heavy weapons, either surrendered or fled toward the mountains. Within minutes, she heard the words that made 12 hours of hell worthwhile. Reaper Base to all aircraft. Package secure. I repeat, package secure. All 4 hostages are alive and unharmed. Relief flooded through her so completely that her hands shook on the controls. Alive. All 4 of them. After 12 hours of failed attempts, damaged aircraft, and impossible odds, they had actually done it. Outstanding work, 7-2, the ground commander's voice came through her headset, no longer strained with exhaustion but filled with genuine respect. That was some of the finest precision flying I've witnessed in 25 years of service. Morrison's aircraft pulled up alongside hers. Nora, you okay? Your aircraft's trailing smoke. She checked her instruments and saw what he meant. Engine temperature was climbing toward dangerous levels, and she was losing fuel from somewhere in her wing tanks. The missile's near miss had done more damage than she'd initially realized. I can make it back to base, she reported. Systems are degraded but controllable. We'll escort you home, Park said, taking position on her other wing. Lead the way. The flight back to base passed in a blur of damage assessments and system failures that her aircraft managed to overcome through engineering redundancy and pilot determination. By the time she touched down on the runway, emergency vehicles were already waiting. She shut down her engines and sat in the cockpit for a moment, letting the magnitude of what had just happened settle over her. 4 American lives saved. A 12-hour siege ended. An impossible mission accomplished against odds that had made seasoned veterans doubt it could be done. Ground crew swarmed around her aircraft, assessing the battle damage while she climbed down from the cockpit. Her legs felt unsteady, a combination of adrenaline crash and the G-forces she'd endured during those final attack runs. Captain Steele. Colonel Martinez approached with an expression she'd never seen before, something that might have been pride. Preliminary reports indicate you engaged and destroyed 7 enemy positions under heavy fire while maintaining precision sufficient to avoid civilian casualties. Yes, sir. Mission accomplished. But it was Morrison who said what everyone was thinking. Nora, that was textbook precision under impossible conditions. I don't know if anyone else could have pulled that off. The same pilot who had questioned her readiness just hours earlier now looked at her with the kind of respect that couldn't be faked or forced. It had to be earned, one perfect bomb placement at a time. Within an hour, the base's communication center buzzed with news reports. The successful rescue dominated headlines, described by reporters as a masterpiece of coordination between ground forces and air support. The precision strikes that had broken the siege were credited to exceptional pilot skill under extreme conditions. But Nora didn't watch the news coverage. Instead, she filed her mission reports, debriefed with intelligence officers, and prepared for the next day's training schedule. Because that's what pilots did, they flew their missions, saved lives when possible, and got ready to do it again tomorrow. Later that evening, as she walked across the tarmac toward her quarters, she passed her F-35 sitting in the maintenance hangar. Technicians worked to repair the missile damage, welding patches over holes and replacing damaged components. She paused to run her hand along the aircraft's wing, feeling the rough edges where shrapnel had found its mark. Tomorrow, it would be airworthy again. Tomorrow, she would be ready for whatever mission came next. And tomorrow, no one would question whether Captain Nora Steele could handle the pressure when it counted. She had already proven that beyond any doubt. Captain Steele's incredible precision under fire reminds us that courage and skill know no boundaries. Her story proves that when the stakes are highest, true professionals rise to meet the challenge. If this story of determination and excellence inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible military stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced a moment where everything depended on your performance?